Hey, welcome everyone to our midsummer SPAC meeting of July 9th. I'd like to call you to order. And let's. Oh.
What's fun?
Nice to hear my voice. We usually start with everyone introducing themselves. So maybe we start with Chris, go this way, and then turn online.
Chris Darcy, Commissioner.
Linda Beerley, Salem Arts Foundation visitor.
Carl Robb, Commissioner.
Brian Hart, Commissioner.
And I'm Susan Napat, Chair.
Crystal Lauer, Commissioner. Kathleen
Spence-
Staff Liaison.
Sorry, Spencer, we're commissioner.
Hey, welcome everybody. Do we have any public comment?
We don't have public comment on any items outside the agenda. We do have public comment from Salem Parks Foundation on agenda item 4. So we will make sure to include their comments when we get to that item of the Eco Earth Globe.
Okay, great. So let's move on to the consent agenda. I'd like to make a motion to accept the agenda for today's meeting and the minutes from the June 11th meeting. Second on that. All in favor? Aye. Anyone? No? Okay, approved. New business. Okay, that's me. Acquiring new art for public art collection. Just on a personal note, I've been very excited lately to be kind of hands-on with the collection when we moved it from the Civic Center and into the library and just getting to see what's there, what's not there. I had some idea, but I got a bigger picture and saw that there were some gaps in terms of contemporary Salem artists that are really very important to the art scene that's going on now and the work that's going on now. And I'm lucky enough to know some of them. And a lot of them are getting on in years and they're trying to assess their estates and what they're doing and have kind of found out that some of them, if we would approve it, would be willing to donate work to the collection. And what I'd like to do is set up a subcommittee because I haven't gone into the nitty-gritty of what it takes to acquire the work and what we would need to do. I'd like to set up a subcommittee to look into that and to decide, if we want to acquire new work. These are mostly 2D work that would be hung. It's not big sculpture or anything. Where we would put it, what that would look like, would we have an exhibit, like the history, and I learned so much from this little pamphlet about the history of how there were exhibits, and that's how the work was required. Maybe we can get an exhibit, I don't know, but so my motion would be to form a subcommittee to look into this. Any discussion?
Do you have a second to your motion?
I need a second to the motion, yes.
I'll second.
The only advice I can give as state staff liaison is that subcommittees are to perform research. So this subcommittee would be finding out any information that would be helpful to then bring back to the full commission for any decision-making process.
Any discussion on this? Any thoughts?
The only comment that I would make is that as we have gone through sorting out of work at the library, and a lot of the work that belonged to the foundation was dispersed to others, was not returned to the library. And as we have older pieces that there is no room for, I would just want to be careful about making sure that the city has places to place more what I would describe as portable works. Because my guess is that the Civic Center will not be a space with it will be a cube farm type of environment, probably for the most part, an open office plan. So I would just want to be careful, or let's just say purposeful, moving forward. I also really think that we should be focused on the massive projects that we have talked about now for a year, like the sculpture wells, like the 0.5% for the civic center, like dealing with some major conservation issues, like with the Echo Earth Club. So I'm a big one for, let's put a roadmap together that is attainable, fits within what the city, is trying to do. I also know that if you read carefully in the essay in this catalog, you'll see that the city has dealt with these donations over the years. We're sitting next to 3 of them here. And just because somebody wants to give a work to something doesn't necessarily mean that it's a great idea for the long run. So I think a subcommittee to look at some of these issues would be good. But I do think there is no other body than SPAC that is tasked with looking at these big public projects. So I just want to make sure we don't lose our focus, because they are big, by design. So that's the only comment I would make.
And I would say too, I know there are a couple of works that, once we've been going through the Civic Center and things like that, I know you've reached out a couple times of like, I think this is in the collection, but we're not 100% sure. So I think it also would be really important to make sure we have a firm awareness and understanding of what we actually have in the collection currently. And then if there are gaps that we want to fill, we can look into that. But I do feel like that would be a priority first, is understanding exactly what is currently in our collection.
When do you think that, I know we're working on.
I think that is, I think that's
Yeah.
all part of the database inventory conversation.
Right.
So I think, as Chris, says, it is part of a larger project. So again, I don't think there's an issue going into the research of what it would look like to do this. But that would be one of my concerns, is acquiring work, we still don't even know exactly what we have here right now.
Right. I would feel a little bit of urgency only because these people are aging. And that then their estates are gonna go to someone else rather than in there. So I'd still like to have the committee taking into account what both of you said. Trying to share that if someone else would wanna work with me on it, or maybe it is part of the inventory, which you have the time to actually put into that as well.
That's
Okay, so I guess what do we need to do formally now? We made the motion has been seconded, we vote on it. Right?
Yeah, any further discussion that you wanna have on the item, and also identifying potential members to join you on this subcommittee would be a good conversation to have now.
Is there anyone else that would be interested in that?
I just don't have time.
Yeah, I'd be interested, but the immediate, but in a month or two.
Yeah.
I probably can't join, but my comment would be that I do like the idea of some of these prominent artists in the Salem area. I love that idea to our collection, hoping we can find places for them. I really like the idea of it, for sure.
I'm hoping that the council chambers will have room for them, just to have, Salem, prominent Salem artists in there. I did see that they may have paneling in there or something, so we'll have to find out about that.
Well, that's a follow-up question too. Who, if we do decide to acquire anything, or even with the reinstallation of everything, is that a conversation where we make recommendations on where things would be installed, or?
Yeah, you can definitely make recommendations. Ultimately, it is the city manager who has authority of where art is placed, but of course, your guys' recommendation is well warranted and wanted, and I think it ties it all together with the Civic Center and talking about a percent for art and knowing that art will potentially, we would want art in that space. We'll have a percent for art in that space. And we'll want to be thoughtful about where art is being replaced. Because if you haven't been to Lauk since art is there, it looks really nice in there. So it will be something to consider about, does the art stay, that is at Lauk's now, stay there? Or do we want some of it to be placed back at Civic? Aaron and the engineering team will come back to you guys and they will want to talk about the percent for art and art at Civic after the renovation is complete. So these conversations can couple nicely with those.
And something else I think we could look into is what other city buildings there are that could have art, like here and other Center 50 Plus and other buildings. Okay, any more discussion? So I guess the motion, do we have to indicate who in the motion that I would be chair and then possibly Krista?
Yeah, can we just put it-
Thank you.
We could have, you can be a subcommittee of one, and then in the future, if you would like to add members to it, that's fine.
Okay,
yeah, okay.
let's do it that way
Yeah,
then.
because I could be much more.
Okay, and that's a resource too,
Yes.
probably. I think we might have some good news for help with the inventory too coming up soon, so.
Yeah.
Anyway, okay, so all in favor of forming a subcommittee to look into acquiring new art in the public art collection? Say aye. Aye. Anyone opposed? Okay, anyone abstaining? All right, passed. Okay. Oh, here's me again, consideration of unfinished business. Last month, we were we were given a refresher about what what staff has authority over what it doesn't. And since then, I've also done a little more looking into it and talking to Kathleen, and I see that the definition of public art in terms of spec is being owned by the collection. And unless that could change, we are in a box. And what I'm understanding is that that cannot change for legal reasons because of liability, free speech, etc. So that kind of, with Councilman Ishioka's motion to council for us to look into temporary art. And I don't know what the conversation is between the lawyer now and Councilman Ishioka, but I'm understanding that there's some conversation there, but I just wanted to be able to follow up on what we talked about last month and also just to get people's feelings about and thoughts about being, how for years, I mean, I have some minutes from Blade, even before Chris was, where there was a desire to have temporary art in Salem. And I guess the only way that we could have temporary art is to accept it into the collection. However, short term that might be. And it's the essential. It's cumbersome, but that seems to be the only way we do it.
Just an indulgence for a visitor, what is temporary art?
Art that might not be even an installation for a day or a couple of days.
Okay.
A
Like
light
the
show
Christmas stuff.
also we're sort of talking about wrapping the utility boxes in neighborhoods.
So is that-
fence painting in
Is that considered
neighborhoods.
the wrapping, are those considered temporary art?
I would not. I would not consider a utility wrap a temporary work plan.
Just-
That's my
Yeah.
opinion.
Well, there's still restrictions on that. Maybe that's why I'm lumping it together. There's restrictions on having art that's outside of the collection. So, not just temporary, right? Probably would be.
But I think to Linda's question, you know, a temporary work of art could be a projection on a building. It could be some lighting, let's say the lighting of the Marion Street Bridge.
Yeah.
Or the Union Street Bridge. It could be a performance piece that would be site specific, like a piece of choreography set around the landscape of Mirror Pond or the Civic Center. It could be a laser.
Projection mapping.
Yeah.
Show.
Yeah, I mean, it could be like you mentioned, Christo, you know,
Yeah.
again, a site specific piece in the landscape.
Right.
I was on the PSU campus in the spring when the camellias were blooming, and it looked like some students had created from the fallen flowers some actually very cool groupings of them on the ground. Yeah, it was fun.
Like your piece that you did,
Yeah, the before I died mall.
yeah, so there was,
That was a month long.
Yeah.
Installation.
That would be another
Riverfront.
example.
right, the scarves that were around that, you know, about that project around that.
Yes.
That would be considered
Yeah.
temporary.
Well, one to keep going.
Any other thoughts?
Why does the city government have to be involved in any of this stuff?
Because, again, because we are a city entity, but I guess,
I mean, I guess the point
Yeah.
my question is,
yeah,
if someone like Jessica Ramey
yeah,
wanted to do an oversized puppet parade
yeah.
through her neighborhood, why does she have to go to the government, which she didn't luckily, to get some kind of a stamp of, like, it's okay? I mean, I think this stuff happens because it bubbles up from the ground rather than, I'd like to do something for a day and now I have to go to the city and I probably have to pay a fee and someone's gonna vote on it and then someone's gonna reverse it. It just seems like it just sucks the energy out of the joy of coming across something that would be spontaneous. I think the city is so risk averse that it misses out on opportunities like this. And I know that that's the way they think. I hope something really great, I hope that there will be a guerrilla takeover of some of these open spaces,
Yeah, I guess it's
since
just
I've got somebody from the parks coming.
Yeah.
A gorilla.
Yeah.
A fun one.
Yeah. I guess it just clarifies, you know, where we are, and I just wanted to see what happens, maybe that would, you know, that'd be great, but if someone comes before this body and, you know, and asks to be able to do a project, we would have to then deal with how, you know, we'd have to answer and figure out how to do it.
Easier
That
to
hasn't
beg
really happened.
forgiveness than to ask forgiveness,
Yes.
always.
Yeah.
I do think that it would be good if the city, if we could use our connection to the cities to encourage more occasions to light the Union Street Bridge. As the city was able to do it when first the war in Ukraine started, and then there were a couple, they lit the bridge for the Saxon colors when there was a shooting in Bush Park. You know, those were things that brought people downtown and that people noticed and people talked about. And the city, apparently the hardware and the software is it at the bridge to do that.
They did it for Make Music Day too, and they would change it to orange for that.
Okay, great.
They do it all the time, don't they? They light it all the time anymore.
You know, I don't always go, I'm not always I'm down there to know
Yeah.
But that's an example of the city, there's a bridge, it's used by a lot of different people. You can see things going in a car or a bus, and it just seems like, we could help make the case of why this stuff is added value to downtown, just to use that one example. So that maybe over time, the city would change, the attorneys would change their minds.
So the lighting of the bridge is just kind of like somebody in the city just decides to do it and then they do it, so it's not considered a work of art or anything.
I think you can make a request.
But
That's my
then, then we'd have to deal with it being temporary art, we'd have to bring it
No.
into the collection.
Don't even refer to it as art, just
Yeah.
present an opportunity.
Yeah.
I wish I could think of another, like I thought about red, white, and blue for 4th of July. I didn't call anybody about it, but
I think they did rainbow for the.
Pride.
For Pride.
that's
That's what
great.
I think it
That's
was,
great.
the original initiative, I think, came from Virginia State. Especially Ukraine one. Yeah,
Well, and
yeah, and Brian, I know, has been doing a lot of research.
yeah, well, and
So I'd love
I
to
think we'll
hear.
talk about our research later, but
Okay.
my thoughts are, yes, I also know the kind of box we're in, and I would also like to see it expand. I don't know if that's what everybody wants, but I am all in favor of that. Because I think, and we'll talk about it more in my time, but it's, everybody that I've ever talked to, whether it's, here in a SPAC public meeting, that we want more art, I think city wants more art, and certainly the public wants more art. So we're trying to figure out how to make that happen, if that's what I'm understanding from you. And I support that thought. I
Yeah.
also want more art. I want it to be easier. I wanted to see if we can partner with possibly nonprofits like other cities do to make it happen. So maybe it's not a legal risk or a burden to city staff. But I'm all for it. I don't know if I've talked to anybody ever that said, I don't want more art in Salem. So I think it's universal, just how to do it.
So, just a question, so something like the World Beat Festival, where, kids are making things get pinned up, that to me would fall under the umbrella of temporary art. Or a Parade of Nations as another part of World Beat. The children's parade at the Salem Art Fair. It just seems to me that there are many examples of these types of activities that actually happen in our city. Some happen on city property. And they are very low, World Beat does use live fire, but most of this stuff is very low risk. So it would be interesting to invite Councilor Nishioka to join us for a meeting, just have she's a positive force in Salem for things that engage the community. She's an athlete, she's a runner, she gets out, she's an Ikebana designer. She likes to see this stuff happening because she knows that it's actually makes for, it builds community. So I do think it would be just worth it.
Yeah, I agree, especially after hearing from Brian too. I think he's been in contact with her about certain things. Okay, any more discussion on that? I would just say to be continued. I don't think we should just say, nope, you can't ever do anything we want to do. But just to kind of, and we appreciate that you brought all this to our attention.
I'm happy to, and I do wanna just add that city staff in collaboration with the attorney's office are still working towards getting back to the Councilor Nishioka's motion, and they will also be providing different avenues for what it would mean to be able to host or facilitate temporary art. The exact motion, are you guys familiar with the exact motion? Would it be helpful if I read the exact motion? that Councilor Nishioka?
If you have it handy, sure.
Yeah.
I'd like to hear it again. I know I've listened to it a few times.
There it is. I look at it.
Yeah, so I move to direct city staff to provide a staff report to council outlining the requirements and process to modify the city's public art regulations to allow the temporary display of public art. So it's pretty specific, and that's the specific motion that staff in the attorney's office will be responding to. I also want to point out that you guys are, as the only city body that deals with art, you guys are in a difficult position because so many people, whether they're working for the city, whether they're not working for the city and they live and visit our city, they want more public art. And you guys feel that pressure directly, so you're in a really difficult spot to try and navigate that, and I really appreciate how much you guys do and encourage the city to continue to research. And of course, you guys have the insight that we're looking for, so they're valuable conversations, and thank you for contributing to them.
That sounds a little helpful, thank you.
I also do think that it would be super helpful if we could have a public meeting aside from a commission meeting that brought the public together so that the city might hear from people who live here, who are advocates for these kinds of community building efforts, why these things are, why it would be important to either change something or relax some of these rules in order for more of this to happen. And I would like to talk more about the utility wraps at another meeting.
And one last note, as I work in Parks and Recreation, and that you can absolutely encourage more people to do, is to host events like Salem Art Association does with the art fair, like World Beat does, that focus on art. Public spaces can be rented for that purpose.
Any other thoughts? Here we go, public mural and application review subcommittee. Ryan, where is your?
Okay, thank you. So yeah, Carl, Spencer and I have been working quite a bit on research. This is just research that we do. They're not recommendations, they're not anything like that, but we thought we would share some of that research at this public meeting. So, trying to say all the things I'm supposed to say. And we've researched some interesting things. So what we've kind of identified right now is things that other cities are doing, how they do it, and taking a look at that. And so we want to share some of the things that we have found so far. And if Spencer and Carl, if any time you got something to add, let me know, please. But I'm just kind of summarizing what we've worked on. We kind of looked at several things. Kind of our easement process is 7 years, and so we've looked at some other cities, Portland, Eugene, Seattle have 2-year easements. So that's just something that we found, is that other cities are doing less easements. And I know there's been discussion on the differences and things like that. Utility wraps, we have looked into that. There's Portland, Eugene, Seattle, Philadelphia, Hillsborough, all have kind of utility wrap vinyl or painted programs. So we have found that other cities are doing that. And some of these projects are done in partnership with nonprofits. So when there are, I think, capacity issues that they then, some subcontract now, I think Portland has changed it, where it's a little more of a formal subcontract with RAC, so that RAC program that we've heard of, it is a nonprofit. It's not a city body, so it is a nonprofit that they subcontract to do some of that permitting for murals that aren't in the Portland collection. So that's just something that we found, that a lot of other cities are partnering with nonprofits for things like that. There's other programs, manhole covers, that there's artistic designs in Seattle that were really interesting. Water towers. I'm not 100% clear if, I know that there was discussion during the Oregon cherry growers, is that the that it was a flat surface and then they wanted to paint a silo, but they couldn't. And I don't know, I think that was changed to add 3D surfaces, but does that then mean that we could do like water tanks and water, for some reason, I'm very
Yes.
obsessed with water tanks, and I think everyone should be painted. So when I see them around town, I'm like, man, a mural would look really cool on that. Can we do it? If we can, let's start it. Maybe letting the public know that that's a possibility. I've also noticed, we've researched a lot that other cities have a different copyright ownership than we do. So a lot of them have like the city would have a non-exclusive agreement where they could move the painting or a sculpture or do something like that, but then the artist can still retain the rights to that work. Right now, as far as I understand, we kind of have where they can put it on their portfolio, and that's the extent of it. The city owns the rest of that. And so I thought it was very interesting that other cities have a little more leeway on what the artist and even the building owner can do with that. There's online application forms that I really like on a lot of other cities where you can fill it out all online and make it actually there's setting that up that takes time, but I would think that once it's in place, it would save a lot of staff time. So that's maybe an avenue that would really help capacity, because if everything can be done online versus getting it, printing it out, mailing it or handing it to someone, they have to then file it and record it. So just trying to think of what other cities do to make this process easier is been very interesting. There's also, I'm taking a trip to Brazil, and in Rio de Janeiro, there is a very famous public steps with tile artistic that thousands of people, including myself, will go visit every year. So I really like, we've talked about private fences and things, but just there are paintings on fences, I think that other cities have done, but also city-owned things like retaining walls and steps. I think we're pretty specific on what we do. So I was just noticing that other cities do different things and have a little wider thing. Also, just they have a lot of updated language on kind of the new technology that is with art. So QR codes, things that add a different layer of interactivity to art, which was really cool. There's NFC tags, I think they're called, where you can just put your phone on something and then it takes you to a website, you learn more about the artist, the story. A QR code could then give you an audio example of the artist's experience while doing that art, that I thought was really interesting too. So these are just kind of some of the things that we have researched, and I wanted to share some of those. Again, it's not recommendations because we can't do that as a subcommittee, but I wanted to share what we've been working on, because we've been putting a lot of hours for quite a few months. Any questions, thoughts,
I think
ideas?
it's, thank you, super useful.
Yeah.
And I think you made, some of the points that you made are, I think important. Partnering, looking for positive collaborations with nonprofits who may be able to help with capacity issues. Using technology to make processes simpler, like online stuff. Because most arts application, almost everything happens completely online these days. the copyright comment that you made, I think is very important because the city has I don't even know what the word to use is, the fact that they require an artist to relinquish all rights to their work of art when that piece is purchased is just not fair. And it happens across platforms in the city, you know, so if you submit a photograph to the historic preservation photo contest, you relinquish all rights to that image. And the city has the right to use that image in whatever way it wants to without crediting you for your work of art. That is just wrong. So I guess my question before other people comment is, what do you think is next for us?
It's a great question, yeah.
It's a hard
You
question.
know what, I had coffee at, I think, is it Offbeat Coffee? And I happened to look in a different direction. Usually you're driving, I usually approach it from one direction, I looked in the other direction. There's a fabulous wall on the side of that building, there's a north facing wall. There's a big parking lot and then there's a kind of a motorcycle, ATV store.
Yeah.
Across from Furbish, I mean, it's a high traffic area. So, you know, and it happens to be in our neighborhood.
Yeah,
Within the boundaries
Yeah.
of SCAN. So, you know, what if, as you're looking at things now, can anything be improved in order to entice a small business locally owned that might want to do something like that? Because the city also has no subsidies for any of this, right? Like, or you can get a small grant in Portland.
Yeah.
And Eugene, probably in Hillsborough. That's not the case here, but I think that Salem has some businesses that would be inclined to be a financial sponsor if we could make the process simpler.
There had been discussion about putting together a list of locations around the city, including underserved areas, you know, not just rural people, you know, not just downtown. And then also a roster of mural artists. And I've actually started, every time I see a mural, you know, I've met a mural artist in Astoria and I have her information and other people that I talk to, oh, I know all the, so there was talk about that. I think other.
Yeah, Eugene has
do
has a matchmaking, kind of I just call it a matchmaking
Yeah,
kind of process on their website,
yeah.
for sure.
That would
Yeah.
take a lot of effort to do, but it might be something in the future. The other thing that, a couple of things, did you talk to any, artists who've done murals and who have, you know, looked over the city application process and asked them what the sticking points are for them? Because I know that, there has been, talk of doing, you know, businesses wanting to do a mural and working with somebody and they're like, that this is just, it's too much, I can't do it. Whether it's, you know, how much percentage is that because of the way that it's presented, or whether the business just didn't want to deal with it, but it would be interesting to get feedback from actual mural artists who are trying to do mural.
Yeah. Yeah, I noted before I was even on the commission, I've tried several times to get a mural done. And yeah, the main hangups that I saw was, yeah, just the sheer like kind of, you know, someone that doesn't know legal terms and things, they look at that and it just is very intimidating, I think is what I heard a lot from people. Is just like, oh my, that seems too complicated. Too much work, you know, most business owners struggle to just day-to-day survive and maintain their business as is. So to take on something that seems overwhelming, that might not be their expertise, seems absolutely possible. Specifically, I heard about the 7-year easement. They did it's like, wow, that's a long time. I don't know if I could do that as a business owner. Artists, certainly the copyright is a big concern. I've heard when I've talked to artists before. Yeah, so those are things that I've noticed in over a decade of trying to get it done. And that's kind of why I joined SPAC. I wanted to get more info on the inner workings of what the codes are and if there's anything we can do to make this process easier. Because again, I've always wanted more art when I go to other cities. It literally just lifts my spirit and fills my soul when I see more art around. It's the world to me. It always has been. It makes me, and I'm like, I love Salem. I want more of that in Salem too.
In your research, have you come across, web pages or programs that are presented on city websites that really look to you like, wow, I wish ours would be more like that, so that it would encourage people to at least start by finding out information of what to do rather than throwing all of this legal jargon at them.
Yeah, certainly.
So
I
is there-
think that first,
Yeah.
you first click on a website about how to do a mural in X town, and if you see beautiful imagery and things like that, yeah, a lot of them are really beautiful. Philadelphia has one of the most incredible websites and art programs I've ever seen in my life, so if anybody has a chance to check that one out. But there's a lot of them that are really great. Hillsborough, Portland, Eugene's is really cool. Yeah, there's a lot of them that I think are inspiring for sure.
That, I would think that's somewhere where we could start without having to change code or, change the easement right
Yeah.
away. I mean, that could be down the line, but to actually have, the online form presented in a very, encouraging, exciting format online. The online form's would take some work. I think Keith had actually started. He had started that. I don't know where that is or how, but I think that's somewhere, that's like kind of easy. I'm saying this without knowing who on staff would do the web. I know we've tried to just get some minor changes on the website, like with names and things. And that's been kind of slow going, but if we could work with the webmaster and just say, hey, we want it to look something like this, presented that way. Is that something that's doable? If that's what
Well, my thought too, is that, yeah, if it will take work up front, but it could reduce stress and capacity in the future, it's like, if we spend, I'm not a web designer, I used to be, but, 20 hours now and save 100 hours next year, that's to me a win. But if you don't have 20 hours, I guess it's not a win,
But also, if the rules aren't changing, there's only a certain, it would be better for it to be a more streamlined process and user friendly and beautiful and all those things, but with the 7-year easement, with the copyright things, and I don't know if you're really gonna encourage that much more work. I mean, it needs to be done, I'm not disagreeing with that, but I think there's some of the other parts too that are maybe more discouraging public art and more murals. It's maybe the design to do that in some ways.
Do you think that should be maybe taken care of first and then we incorporated that into the presentation?
I don't know.
Yeah, I think on our end, we're really trying to get some guidance. I know I missed our one call with Mark, but it sounded like there was some resolution. On his end, at least what he recommended with the 2-year. The 2-year is being a possibility. I thought that, since being on SPAC, that getting that clarification was pretty huge. So what would that look like to actually see that come to fruition?
So tell me a little more about that. Was there a
So
discussion with Mark and he potentially was open to 2-year easement rather than 7?
Well, on the last meeting, I don't know if that was specifically, but I'm trying to think now, getting all my meetings.
Was that
We talked about that for a long time.
did I mistake that?
Possibly, maybe, I think all that we can do, as far as I know, is in a public meeting, we can, and Kathleen can correct me if I'm wrong, you know, like, we're just presenting research of what we found in other cities right now. And hope to share more, later of what we found. As far as I know, the maximum we could ever do is possibly provide a recommendation for a counselor that would then make a motion. It would have to get voted on, and then that goes to staff to implement that motion. Like what Linda did with the temporary art. Is that kind of the process that I'm understanding it correctly?
Yeah, well, you guys have talked about a huge range of things.
Yeah.
So first is narrowing down the scope of what your ask is. You've asked to put up a ton of potential things with a lot of different implications. So if there's a narrow specific ask, that ask can be made. For instance, if you're wanting feedback on the potential of reducing the easement, specifically reducing the easement from 7 years to 2 years, there's a potential I could bring that specific ask forward to the attorneys. I don't know what process it will take from there or how they will move it forward, what recommendation they'll provide back. But if you have a specific ask, that ask can be managed. But there's been a lot of different things beyond just 2 years versus 7 years, whether it's updates to a website can mean a lot of different things and have a lot of different implications. So it has to be specific and narrow, and any discussion about what those things may be need to have discussion here in the public forum.
Sure. And I'm glad you brought that point up because that's super helpful. Especially, so it sounds like our approach should be one specific ask and only one, because I mean, I guess like my research is like, kind of like, there's a lot of things that Salem varies than other cities and it kind of needs to be modernized. You know, but do we need to focus on one at a time, or is it too much to ask for, like, oh, there's like 5 things that we would love to see happen? I don't know what's an easier task when we present things like that, if it was an official recommendation, or is it better to be laser focused on one thing?
My guidance to you guys is that you will, whatever asks that you make, you want them to be thoughtful and strategic.
Sure.
And so having conversation about multiple items at once here in a public forum where you want the feedback, we want that engagement from everybody here, that's a really difficult thing to manage, and you need appropriate time to do that. So if you're wanting to manage specific items, you just want to make sure that you as a commission have the appropriate time to discuss them and make the appropriate motions for how to move forward. If you're doing multiple things at once, that can it won't be, in my opinion, wouldn't be as effective as staying focused and strategic and making sure that you have the appropriate research to really back up the motions that you're making.
So
It makes sense to bundle. If there's going to be a proposal to improve the mural code, wouldn't it be appropriate to think about the easement length, copyright, a sleeker application process, whether there's a fee or no fee? So your end goal is that there would be murals happening here without people doing end runs on the city, which has been the history of the last several years. That fried chicken place, the flag out on Turner Road. You know, people do that stuff because they don't want to deal with the process. So if our end goal is we want our city to be beautiful, we want community building, we want things that are, people come to see, then we would want to do 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 in order to get over that obstacle. But I do agree, being smart, being strategic, being purposeful, and, you know, focusing on what the real barriers are. I have a question. So the Ray's Produce store on Silverton Road was going to come to this meeting with a mural application. They didn't have their paperwork in order with a 30-day notice or whatever. And so it didn't happen. So maybe we could actually use them as a working, as a kind of a focused conversation, say, what happened to you? Was it too complicated? Was it too expensive? Because it sounded like they got to the point where you had scheduled a public hearing, so they were interested. And maybe just say, okay, well, here's the flashpoint, like it's whatever it is, I don't know that business personally. To just, you know, like use a real example as we're trying to problem solve.
Yeah.
Yeah, that feedback would be great, I think, from them.
Yeah, I mean,
They're still in the process.
yeah,
Still in the process, so I imagine that will come in the months as we make sure that we have all the information we need to provide a public hearing.
Thanks, Spencer,
So kind of going back off of this, like I agree with the short, like being very specific. I guess on our subcommittee, should our research be focused on what the actual legal portions of these programs are doing so that it eases Mark's concerns, or is that way off basis? Because like, yes, we could decide like let's say copyright. That one seems pretty logical. And the 2-year easement, we could probably find legal information on those specific things. But as we get onto the grand, like all the smaller ones, is that even worthwhile? Or should we just like focus on the big ones that would be the easiest for him to kind of tackle?
You definitely don't need to do any sort of legal work that an attorney would be suited for.
Well, that's not what I'm saying. Like
But I
we're
think recommendation, right, to come
Yeah.
back and say, you know, most cities were looking at do X, Y, and Z. Here's an example of the copyright policy, for example, from X,
Yeah.
Y, and Z cities, and provide examples. I think that's helpful to know, to have real life examples for what you're wanting to accomplish that you found through your research is, I think that's helpful.
Okay. Because I guess I think the three of us kind of felt like we don't really know how to make this happen, and trying to find a way to work with Mark and I know it's just recommendations, but it kind of feels like there can't be any movement unless we force it. And so that's kind of, you know, what we're trying to figure out, how do we focus our time?
If a recommendation is going to come from SPAC to city council to council,
Yeah.
is that? But when we present research, we're not presenting recommendations. Then how do you get from that step to?
The recommendations comes from the commission as a whole. So the research that you provides the context for the conversations that need to happen for the recommendations to come from the commission as a whole.
Okay, so that would be the next step, is to come up with recommendations for.
And then a motion for us to vote on, imagine, whether to move forward with it and how you see it moving forward.
And I think to tie the two ends of the conversation together is if you're wanting to make multiple recommendations, that those conversations would need to be happen over a long period of time to get to a place where you're bringing something forward. That wouldn't be, I would, in my experience, I would not expect that to be a single conversation here in the meeting for, within the 20-minute time period, that would turn into a comprehensive suggestion that you would bring forward. So there's lots of conversation that needs to be had, and if you're coupling in website changes, you're coupling in talks about easement, you're coupling in things about X, Y, and Z, those are all important conversations that need to be hashed out by the group as a whole. And the more research that you bring about the different examples that you see, that's going to lend itself to, well, ultimately, how you would move something forward.
So maybe like, okay, let's break this, like, let's just say copyright. So like, next step would be say, let's focus for next month to come up with some examples and a discussion about just copyright, and then we can flush that out, and maybe that comes with another meeting, and then we'll tackle the next step, and then which maybe is the 2-year easement, do a couple meetings like that, and then we come with a comprehensive of like the specific items with this specific information. Is that kind of what you're talking about? Is like, so our next focus could be a specific one item?
That would be my recommendation, and one way to go about it.
Okay.
To speed it along, I think maybe copyright and the easement, I mean, all the legal matters that would have to change, things that would have to change in code. I mean, you don't have to change code to redo the website,
Right.
Or the application. But you have to change code and you have to get the council involved for the easement and copyright and anything else that you find. So I would think we could have that discussion, and then that could be then moved along to the lawyer to advise us on what the next step would be to be able to change that. So I would say maybe in the next meeting, I would suggest that that's what we do, that we, focus on the things that, we need to change within code. That's.
Yeah, so maybe if I'm understanding right, the subcommittee will do more research specifically on 2-year easements, what other cities do and how they do it. And then copyright, what other cities are doing. And then copyright, and then we can bring those specific, just maybe stick with those two. That's kind of the 80-20 rule. That's the one change that produce biggest results. It's 2 changes, does that sound right?
Yeah.
So I can get, we can get pretty specific. Because I think I totaled up, just me, it's not even the rest of the committee, I've spent around 60 hours researching a lot of this stuff, so I certainly can, and I'd love to keep sharing as much as I've found.
This is great. I mean, I think this should be an agenda item until we get to a threshold that, we've set out.
Make a recommendation.
So it seems like the city has fillable forms on its website for other purposes, like applying to be on the border commission,
that's
probably
true.
various permits and what have you. So I hope that we could stop requiring mural applicants to print out a form and then fill it in with a pen and then make a PDF and turn it, it seems like the city might have some goals around efficiency and, operating in more streamlined ways or being more customer friendly. It seems like that would be just a customer service thing that we could do. Same with the website. I mean, the cherry producers, stewards, Waldo stewards, the Damien Gilly mural, we've got some example, we could provide examples, photographic examples on the website that would make it more attractive. Somebody could be like, whoa, I want this. I want to be part of something here.
Just the language could be crafted to be just more encouraging and welcoming, and we will help you, and we want, that kind of thing, starting with that rather than just, you can't do this, and you can't do that.
Yeah, I do think also, this has been going on for now a long time. I mean, this has been an issue for probably 8 years. Maybe closer to 10. And so if Salem would like more work in this arena, then something has to change. Because we know we're not flooded with applications. Artists people who would want to do this work they're feeling like there are just too many obstacles. And if the, people say like, oh, I want these things to happen, well, then we just need to either change something or say, actually, the city, it created too many obstacles and this shouldn't be a goal for Salem. Because we can't get anything done, except for people doing the rubber end.
Right.
Do you think it would be helpful when we start to come up with the recommendations to kind of also lay out our goals in like these different phases? So like phase 1 would be addressing like the legal stipulations of the easement and the copyrights. Phase 2 would be trying to make the mural application itself more condensed or easier or more understandable from an artist's perspective. And phase 3 would be making this all accessible and actually fillable and they can just do it online. That way, when we present it initially, they kind of know what our long game is and what the end goal is.
A work plan is always helpful.
Yeah, I think what I've gotten advice for as far as like subcommittee, we can only provide research.
Sure.
So we can't label it as like this would be phase, because that.
Sure, but I'm thinking when
But
we
yeah,
have
I
those
think it's a
discussions
great
and come up
idea.
with that.
Yeah, for sure.
Then at
Yeah.
least it also will then keep all of us on track too, I think, because right, there are so many ways we could do this, but if it's very focused on like, this is what we're trying to accomplish first, then we can move to this, then we can move to this.
Yeah.
Then we also have clear guidelines of what we are trying to accomplish.
If I understand correctly, and if it's important enough for you, you could have a public subcommittee meeting.
Yeah, I just don't know the
And then
process
you
of that.
can, just, then you can talk about whatever.
Sure, yeah, I think, when it gets over research, it has to be public.
Yeah,
correct.
so that,
Yeah.
I don't know, if you feel like if you're being hamstrung by what you can talk about at your meetings, that, it's an option.
And couldn't, instead of 15 minutes on a regular public SPAC agenda, couldn't there be an hour
Absolutely.
with public comment?
Right.
And
That's when it's
streamed.
Mhm.
So. Yeah, that would be something to look forward to.
So what's
So
the process? Let's say we
just
wanted
call
to
it-
do
you wanna
that,
call
what's
it
the
an
process of that? I let you know that we would like to have a public meeting about.
Yeah, and it would need an agenda,
Mhm.
it would need minutes, it needs to be public, and it needs to be posted, within a reasonable time. We tried to do it a week before. And the week before needs an agenda, so you need an agenda of at least a week before.
And if it would be incorporated into one of our regular SPAC meetings, we'd have to add on time to do that. So this is recommendation.
You can, or you could just
Then
a
just-
lot
Just
more
dedicate that
We
meeting.
adjust the agenda.
Yeah.
And other
Yep.
things, just
We wouldn't get to it that day because we're making time for something else.
It
That's good
seems
to know.
like we have a bunch of other stuff that is ongoing, and we need to talk about.
We
So I
do.
don't know about having
We do.
an hour to do
Yeah,
that within a
yeah.
regular meeting unless it's extended, but.
Yeah, thank you for the time. I will say that, I presented kind of 8 things here. We've researched about 30 different things, so we have tried to pare it down.
It'd be great to hear all of your research and
Yes.
all of your plans and.
Sure.
Is there any action that we need to take on this today?
This time, I believe.
Any more comment? Great, thank you so much, you guys. Okay. Social media and art database, Crystal.
Sure, so I sent Kathleen a message today as well about social media, but just so everybody's kind of aware, I apologize that I have not posted a lot in recent times. I've just been crazy busy. That being said, we also only have one post a month that we are allowed to do at this point, so it does need to be quite strategic in terms of what we're posting. I did want to just come to everybody too, though, and let you kind of know where my head space is at with social media. It used to be very much because we were able to do it on a weekly basis. Like here, let's spend 1 week on all these different artworks, give you the whole story, tell you about the artist. Whereas at this point, I don't necessarily think it makes sense to do it in that structure. So I think at this point, it makes more sense to really focus on updates that we have, opportunities when we have, whenever we post the art wells, when we have opportunities for people to get engaged, I think it makes a little bit more sense to really focus on those avenues. I do also want to ask, this can be from you, this can be from everybody, but we've also been asked to provide as much transparency as possible when it comes to funding. At the same time, people have historically been very critical on social media when it comes to us being transparent about funding. So for example, the Black Disc renovation process. Yes, we used our funds for it, but it also was $6,600. So I'm kind of wondering what everybody is thinking in terms of, I want to be transparent about, we used our funds to finish this project and we're very excited about it and it looks beautiful and we're really happy. At the same time, do we want to put the exact amount? Do we have to put the exact amount when it comes to these kinds of projects? Just kind of wanted to get some additional feedback from everybody else because I've mostly made all the decisions about what we're posting. But I also look and see the feedback that other people comment, and it's not a lot of the time. So just kind of want to see what other people are.
Well, the good news is that most of the work in the city's public art collection was gifted to the city.
It's true. So I do
And so-
include that when possible. People still are not thrilled about those kind of things, but
Well,
I
I think it's,
I mean, they're not really, right.
Okay.
Yes, so a lot of the comments when we put anything about cost related items, it's why are you focusing on this? Go fix the roads.
Yeah.
Why aren't you doing these kind of things? With the understanding that we have our own fund, we get to, the city has dedicated these funds for us to use for the purposes of stewardship of our collection, and that's a great thing. But the reality is a lot of people don't necessarily see it like that. So I want to be transparent about what we're doing, at the same time in a way that people are excited about what we're doing, not just purely critical.
just a few thoughts.
Yeah.
I would be forward thinking,
Yeah,
not looking back at work that was gifted 50 years ago.
yeah,
And it's summer, people are outside, maybe helping people understand that there's a sculpt. I know you've done the Tom McCall sculpture, but there are pieces that are in public parks where you can find them. There are
last summer I did the whole summer of sculpture, so every week it was a different sculpture. It was fun.
I think finding
Yeah.
locating the utility wraps.
Yeah.
That's fun. Figuring out, who did what, whether there's something recognizable.
Yeah.
It is, I think we haven't done a whole lot of new
Right.
work for quite a while.
Yeah, I think that's historically been the challenge, but at the same time, the fact that we have a lot of things on the docket is very exciting, and I think it will lead to a lot of really great feedback and engagement. But that has been a little bit of a challenge recently of just,
I think
we're in planning stages for a lot of things.
the move of the work from the Civic Center into Laos.
Yeah.
There's some interesting work. That space is so boring
Yeah,
that it's really hard to get a good photograph.
right, and that is the challenge, right, because social media is very visually based,
Mhm.
so if we don't have great images,
Yeah.
it's also then really hard to prioritize that.
Yeah.
at the same time, yeah, I want everyone to know I'm trying to think a little bit more creatively and strategically about how we use it. So that's also been kind of why I haven't posted in the last couple of months of just trying to brainstorm some ideas.
Maybe because I come from a marketing background and, you know, it's promotion is, I think should be important
Yeah.
to promote. You know, to even tell the story and pieces of what SPAC is and how it came to be and how it's your collection and.
Yeah,
And about what the commission does and.
that's also been a challenge, is I have been told to significantly condense the amount of text in them. So I used to have,
Headlines.
you know, an intro, a paragraph just about the artwork, a paragraph just
Yeah.
about the artist's bio.
Yeah.
And I've been told to condense that as well, so
Yeah.
it's trying to
ChatGPT
be.
is really good for condensing.
Yeah.
It's really good. I'm like, whoa. So,
What about the scavenger hunt?
No, I like that idea, I
Yeah.
think that's really
I mean,
fun.
that, it's out of date, but it's good enough. There's a ton of them.
When we did, well, actually, I like your idea, so I did that scavenger hunt last year, like the one we actually have, but I like the idea of doing a utility wrap specific one. I think that could be fun, because then it's promoting engagement as opposed to just saying like, here's this thing that happened, go look at it. It's very much like, spend the whole day, walk around downtown, experience all of it. And then if you wanna go see them in person, great, here's where you can find them,
Yeah,
you know, the full works.
also the library groupings, you know, like what we did slow art day, we have the grouping of the three. Focus on those three with what people see, what you see, in relationships between them and different artists, maybe just, then they can go and actually see that in the library.
Yeah.
And there's a lot there.
Yeah.
So, maybe not quite so much background artists that they can go.
Right, it's trying to find the balance
Yeah.
of, yeah.
Can you do links in there as well? Do they? do
Not
links?
on Instagram. And the problem is, so I did that the one time with the scavenger hunt that we did. They were able to post it on Facebook with the link, but not through Instagram. And then they didn't have a link in the bio in Instagram, so it said, go use the link, and then there was no link. So I try to avoid links as much as possible, just because it does get posted to both platforms.
What about in the
So it
newsletter?
needs
Do
to
they ever
sync to
put
both.
picture in the newsletter? I know they have now they have the thing at the bottom that says public art tour, and you click on it, it takes you to the commission site, and tells you all about us, you know? But, and you have to scroll down. But will they ever do that in the newsletter? Cause then they can put.
But then again, I think if we have, when there are more
Something-
opportunities and things
something
like that,
major.
something major, we can ask.
Is there a reason why they reduced it to once a month?
They said they were just doing kind of an overhaul of how the city in general uses social media. And they wanted to promote more, time sensitive, notices essentially. So like, there's construction here, or there's an event here, or there's something like this, as opposed to just general information and background.
I kind of, I get that.
Yeah, no, totally, and I think,
Road
yeah,
closure,
absolutely.
detour, weather
Absolutely.
alert, I don't, that's the reality
Totally.
of their
Absolutely.
kind of main mission.
Yeah.
Um,
Well, and honestly,
Well,
that was some of the issues sometimes with when we did it weekly, is they'd have 3 other posts that day
Sure.
Yeah.
with that kind of information,
Yeah.
and then it would get buried.
Well,
So-
that's why last year, one of my missions that failed miserably was like separate sites. You
Yeah.
know, sites for info,
Yeah.
and then sites for the beautiful stuff.
Yeah.
Which to me makes sense. I know they were very much against it, but then I always feel like we get punished, because I was like, we should post more, and they're like, how about less?
Yeah.
Yeah,
How do you like that?
Yeah.
yeah.
So,
Like, I don't.
yeah, it's a very different approach. At the same time, again, I think we can be strategic and still utilize it to our benefit and our advantage, and let people know still great things that are happening. Because there's so many wonderful things that we have in the works. But yeah, just kind of wanted to update everybody on the approach and the mindset behind what we're doing.
Sure.
Also invite people to come to meetings, and then, you know, I don't know if they.
That would be our post for the month. So
That
I
would
don't
be-
think that would be necessarily, like, again, if it's where we're having a public
Yeah.
forum or something,
That would be.
we could absolutely ask them to
Yeah,
do something
that's
like
right.
that, and that wouldn't necessarily count, but.
Well, I just have to say, Chris has been doing an amazing job with her.
100%, like the,
Well, there are
garden sale.
almost no followers. I mean, it's,
Yeah, how can we do that?
well, first of all, Facebook is pretty much dead, so
Yeah.
it needs to be an Instagram feed.
yeah,
And
Yeah.
I manage a lot of feeds, so I can't,
You do.
I can't do more.
Yeah.
You do, no, what you do
The
is
content is great,
phenomenal. It's really great,
Yeah.
yeah.
That's-
And I
did-
wish we could have our own site, our own, site that we could do that.
I do wanna do a time check in.
Yeah, yeah.
12:46 now, so we have
Okay,
14 minutes and we still have a lot to get to.
okay, anything else? All right, moving
And
on.
I would suggest that we skip ahead and at least make sure that we address the eco earth globe.
Okay,
So I would skip ahead just for eco earth globe and then we can go back to labels. The other artwork there's nothing.
so are we moving to art labels or are we going?
We're
directly
skipping art
to-
labels. We'll get back to that before
Okay.
we go. I just wanna prioritize eco earth globe. I think we'll have
Okay.
time to talk about earth globe and then we can talk about labels.
Okay.
We probably will not talk about these other art. Other pieces of art in the condition and location reports. But I wanted to prioritize that.
Okay,
Earth globe, let's have that conversation. There's been a couple updates that have come in just in the last 48 hours. We'll start by reading the public comment by Linda from the Salem Park Foundation.
I definitely should put that in a nutshell, but that would be helpful.
Yeah, that would be great.
Okay, so when I have been here previously, I've heard, many options for the Eco Earth Globe. And I just wanted people to remember that we have fundraised for a very specific purpose. And if that doesn't happen, we will end up returning all the money. So I just wanted you all to keep that in mind, and that's all I have.
that's a good.
Thanks. I also have had been involved in little conversations with myself, engineering staff, you guys met, and we've started a conversation with historic landmarks. We currently have a meeting scheduled for tomorrow to discuss it further and what the impacts of it being a historic landmark would be on the restoration and how we could possibly navigate that. We also have updates from, let's see if I can open it. We have some updates from Tony. He got back to me and provided updates. Some of the updates we requested from ARG. Basically, the big ones to know are maintenance would be yearly with warm water, low pressure, washed with a biocide. An inspection to ensure that grout and sealant joints are sound. Any open joints will need to be repaired so water can't get in behind the tile or would cause biogrowth, freeze, pop tile stops. The full removal of the tile and abatement of asbestos containing layers in order to expose the original tank would cost approximately $400,000.
So I have a question right now, if it's okay.
Yeah.
Why are they removing the asbestos? Why are they not just capping it? It seems like that would be so much cheaper and just as safe. So if you have the opportunity to ask that question, would you do that for me?
Yeah, I would have to ask that question and get an official answer. My guess is that you can't be so choosy as to not start to get into the asbestos. But maybe,
If you could just ask,
Yeah.
I would, and get a good answer, that would be great.
yeah. Definitely. Also wanted to let us know that understanding that fundraising would require some time. That current escalation rates are at 4 to 5%, meaning every year the construction costs will increase by that percentage, and at that high of dollar amount, that's quite a bit of money. So the sooner the project is started, the sooner it will come in close to that estimate.
Is there an estimate how much the yearly maintenance will cost?
I don't have that now. And it would
It's
be,
kind of moot unless the restoration happens.
Right, it's just to figure it in, I think, might be good to know, because that.
he kind of finishes it by saying removing the tile now has benefits in that the custom ceramic pieces could be saved and stored away. However, the downside would be that there is an added cost to every time contractors have to mobilize and set up, meaning the scaffolding and all of that.
Could you forward that email to me and Carol Snyder? That'd be great.
Most definitely.
So they're saying essentially there are two ways we could go about it. The first would be to remove the tile, to treat it, and then just wait to reinstall. But then they would have to do the scaffolding and all that the second time, or we do it all at once.
So what is next? So at our last meeting, we posed these questions. We got a response from ARG, it came through Public Works. Now we're here. Now we've heard from Linda about the fact that restricted funds have been raised and are in hand. Now we're $1 million. Now there's another $1 million that has to be raised.
Right.
So what is next? Who makes the decision? It is part of the city's art collection. It is a landmark. You know, you're gonna have a meeting tomorrow. What do you think it will come out of that meeting? Is it just information? Is it Parks and SPAC and Public Works that would have to agree to proceed with this unbudgeted capital project? I'm just trying to get, because Linda reminded me the years that have passed since our first meeting about this with the Parks Foundation. And then nothing happened, which caused a lot more deterioration. I'm just mindful that, like, the sands are dropping in the hourglass. So I'm just unclear about, after your meeting tomorrow, does that go to a higher level within the city? Does it come back to SPAC? So that, you know, it's summer, it's gonna be 90 on Friday, and then suddenly it'll start to rain, and it'll get cold, you know, and it's like repeat. So,
The motion made at our last meeting was to have a public meeting. So much of the information I would hope to collect from landmarks and engineering and these responses to ARG were to bring forward to a public meeting. That was a motion made by this commission. If this commission no longer wants to host a public meeting for feedback to decide a direction to go, that is a change that you can make. If you would like to decide on a direction that you would like to put forward.
But my only stipulation is that including at this public meeting, it just is clearly understood that the funds we hold right now are restricted to the mosaic, restoring the mosaic sculpture. And because if at the public meeting, somebody says, oh, what about this, what about that? They need to understand that if they go off in a different direction, we cannot release these funds. And that's our fiduciary responsibility.
Linda, when you say restoring mosaic, does it have to be put back exactly as it was?
But it has to be a mosaic structure. Our fundraising is all focused.
Does it have to be on the eco earth float, the mosaic?
Well, that's certainly the approach we've taken. I mean,
But does that, you know, when you say
well, maybe
funds are restricted, could they use the mosaics to do something else?
like what?
Well, I know there's a wall.
No, it is definitely.
It has to be
been
on that
characterized as the
structure,
globe.
on the
Yeah.
structure, that's what.
Well, that's what the landmark is. It's, the base is the Echo Earth globe, the tiles are adhered to that, it's a package. It's not about, let's take Africa and we're gonna put it over here, and we're gonna take.
Yeah, and then it's certainly not an educational project about the pole. You know, I mean, that just can't be done, and use our money, you can do, the city can do it, but not with these funds.
Got it. Realistically, do you think that enough funds could be raised?
Absolutely, I mean, it will take some time, just like the email says,
Okay,
but yes, I have no doubt that we can raise that money.
that is good to know.
But, you know, it took us 3 years to raise $300,000. And so,
You had mentioned that maybe there were some benefactors that might want to give bigger.
we would look, and I know there's people out there with money, whether they would choose to spend it like this, is anybody's guess.
Well, I think we should go ahead with the public meeting because the more publicity out there and input and, you know, then it could become a thing and more people would know about it,
Just so
and know
it's
that
clear
that it's
the
in
money, this
peril.
money has been raised for restoration of the Eagle Rock Globe. That's my only caveat.
You know, unless there's another way to get the word
And
out.
that way, we can also send in a letter to our donors, you know, and let them know the progress. Because I get emails and Roger Burtonridge, one of the forces behind this sculpture, put in a little note in his check that he sent this week, and he said, when is the city gonna start on the vote?
He's a former mayor
Yeah.
who lived in our neighborhood.
Do you have any other suggestion about how we could get the word out? Or, I mean, I know you've done mailings and all that, but I think it needs to be really out there about exactly what's going on.
A public meeting, you know, is pretty good, and we can put it on our public media, you know, I think the city. I mean, I think all hands would be on deck to publicize the meeting, so. And I don't know, do you all hold public meetings in the council chambers? How do you do that?
Well, I've never been part of a meeting like that.
It could be at Pringle, it could be
Oh,
in the Laux, it could be in
The
the
larger
Anderson,
meeting room here, depending on the size as well.
Anderson room at the library.
and then it would, who would be doing, we would be presenting history and story and
I think it would
the
be,
engineers and everybody.
yeah, it would
Okay.
like, and Aaron Kimsey, like, you know, on Kimberly Fitzgerald, SPAC.
And the staff report, you know, ideally, there would be a staff report for people to offer comments,
Mhm.
because not everybody will show up in person. A lot of people will write comments.
So what's the remaining amount of money
Could
that
be a
needs to be
Zoom,
raised?
Well, what did Aaron say? He put like 1.5 million, as I remember.
So I'm just wondering, because you said it took 3 years to raise 300,000, I mean, are you expecting that same rate to? Because I think, unless
I
I'm
hope so.
misremembering, I think Tony mentioned that, you know, not only are there cost escalations every year, but that the condition of the globe is also deteriorating
Right.
continually, right? So the
Yeah.
longer you wait, I assume it's not just escalation, but it's in worse shape and more housing.
I will tell you that this, you know, this hiccup will slow people down. I mean, people want surety. I mean, you know, and right now, our donations are way down because of exactly that. The entire country is waiting to see who the other shoe is gonna drop.
Yeah.
I mean,
I mean, it's gonna be 10 years before we have
I
the,
have no answer for that. I don't know.
because in 10 years, maybe it's beyond repair, something, and you know,
It's getting
and
close to that
costs
now.
are already, you know, the rate, so.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, we may end up returning everybody's money. I have no idea. You know, if I had donors, you know, waiting in line, it would be great, but I don't.
Well, I think we would be able to tell if we had a meeting and what the response would be
Yeah.
and, you know, whether people were supportive and excited. Maybe this is something that people need to believe in too.
It could be, but, And the other thing is, I think they will have questions like, well, what will happen if nothing, if you don't do anything, what will happen? Will you take the globe away? Will it, I think that's the questions they will have. And how did you let this happen? That's another thing you're gonna have.
And there's costs associated with just taking it away. So
Oh,
that's not
big
pretty,
time.
right, so,
So
yeah,
plus
so
just
it's,
the
yeah.
historic, that it's a historic thing. Is that part of your meeting too? You said about the historic designation, so there are probably certain things you can and can't do.
That's why we
Precedent,
designated it a
Right.
landmark.
right. So there's precedent for things like this, I'm sure.
But I do think, Kathleen, if you can ask Tony, I guess this is the representative from ARC, if you can ask him why they can't just cap that asbestos.
Yeah.
Because that sounds like a really big part of the expense. And I know that asbestos gets capped in many, many contexts anymore. It's just cheaper.
Yeah, I wonder if it's because they actually do need to move and there's stuff behind.
Well,
That's-
who knows, but
Big
they
question,
will know,
Yeah.
yes,
I think you could have addressed that, but it would be good to have a solid answer.
yeah,
Okay. Thank you.
yeah.
It is just a little past 1, so I wanna be sensitive and aware of everybody's time. And I know you all just a small amount of time. So I imagine some of you have to leave at this point.
I have another meeting. I can stay for probably like 10 minutes. But
Should
I,
we just talk, since we have all the labels here, do we need to make some kind of decision on the labels at this point, or
That's up to you guys. This is your guys' discussion.
do you wanna, just, are you prepared to kind of
Yeah.
talk about the labels?
so in my touring of public art, I took photographs of a number of different approaches to labels for exterior sculpture. No, I would say none of this is like an emergency. So I don't know if you can pull up that document that I sent you.
Yeah.
Basically, here in Salem, we have older things, old labels. We've got, like, here's an example. This is the Bill Blix piece that was in the entryway to the Civic Center. It's a wood plaque, it's got some formica, it's drilled into a concrete wall. Okay, we want to move away from that type of stuff. So here is the label for the piece outside. My guess is that because of the way it's mounted on that boulder, that Brad Root may have had a contract requirement to provide his own label. Okay, let's keep going. So here's the label in Portland, and scroll down so you can see the setting first. Just go to the next. Okay, here's where it is. There's an Alexander Lieberman sculpture in a park in Portland. It's actually a very elegant little piece. The square the square over that's embedded in the concrete. So you can probably take a piece of equipment over it. Yeah, let's go back, scroll up a little bit. Looks like this. So you've got a bronze plaque, it's pretty good sized. Got the name of the piece, the artist, the year. This particular work was a gift to the city. And then it's branded. So it's the City of Portland Public Art Collection. And up until recently, it was maintained by RAC, which is the 501c3 regional arts organization. And then there's a phone number, their website, so this is what I would describe as an investment in a branded approach. And there for the long term, because it's an exterior piece. Let's go to the next example. This is in the same park. So this is a granite bear. And on the side of the base is another plaque that's set into it. This was gifted to the city by a Rotary Club. And both these pieces and some other pieces are in a block-long urban park. Let's keep going just in the interest of time. Here is another example, where, I'm showing this just because we've got pieces that are coming for the downtown and the West Salem, utility wraps. So this is on the PSU campus, it's, the piece relates somehow to the School of Social Work. There's a brick, kind of base, there's a pedestal, and then keep going. And then there is a description of the work of art that's actually set, it's cast bronze, but it's set into the base. I think I've got one more example. Oh, another approach. On the Transit Mall in Portland, there are a series of pieces that were commissioned by TriMet when light rail and the Transit Mall was installed. The sidewalks on both of those north and south Cutlet streets are faced with brick. And then the labels for the sculptures that line those streets are, these look like aluminum. They're set into the brick, and you can see that some of them have gone through a fair amount of wear. Okay, let's just keep going. Then here's another example. This is at the Halliford Museum of Art. There are the Dick Elliott reflector panels that are on the second floor. There's a label on the sidewalk level that relates to the work that's just up in this direction. And then I've got one more, because Lee Immonen, sculptor who was the restorer of the black discs, was actually the sculptor of a large piece at the State Lands Building. This label is only about this big, and it does look like brushed aluminum. It's literally affixed to a concrete wall adjacent to the sculpture. So I don't think we need to make any, I'm just bringing this really as research. But different approaches. Looking over here, this is Mirror Pond. And what's been used at both Mirror Pond and for the Good Sense sculpture and the Untitled Roy Setzel and the work at the Convention Center are pieces which I describe as on lollipop sticks. So this approach is not my favorite, but I do think we could have a longer conversation at a subsequent meeting about cost. Rick Yerk, who is on the board of Oregon Artist Series Foundation, sent me an email citing a label type that he thought might work at the convention center. I asked them, and these are the current labels,
Which are blank.
Obliterated.
the content has been completely lost due to deterioration. And this one's an interior label. But I do think, just to not take up more time, the other more pending label issue is marking the transfer of the works in the library collection that transfer to the city. Kathleen has examples of them. The city paid a graphic designer to do all this layout. And I suggest continuing that because it's clean and it's all saved, and simply putting a footer in there to mark that transfer. Yeah, there's a good.
Rather than changing it to its Salem Public Library Foundation collection, just changing it to Salem Public Art Collection?
Or making an edit that has language to that effect. So it was actually, those pieces were contributed by the Salem Library Foundation to the city's art collection.
And you think that is important to note that donation?
I do, because otherwise that kind of information gets lost. And that happens a lot. So,
Because just for as a graphic designer, I'm sure these files exist.
yeah,
Yeah, they're
You
very
know,
easily.
And that simple change, just saying Salem Public Art Foundation, and then maybe a separate label somewhere that says these many works in this collection previously owned and donated, rather than having it on everything. And
I think it's important to do it for every single one.
I
Provenance is very, very important. And there's so many works in our collection that we don't have accurate provenance for. And to not know where they come from is a very big issue.
I also think that people, our city relies on the good work of the Parks Foundation and the Library Foundation. And to me, it just seems like if someone takes the time to read the label, they should know this is how it got here. So
okay.
anyway, unfortunately, I have someone's picking me up.
Okay. So maybe we will table the other articulation, and I think we will adjourn the meeting.
All right,
Unless anybody has anything else to say. Thank you.
thank you all.
Yeah, thank you for having all of these support materials.
Yeah.